My family, the Niblocks, have been out in Canada since 1846. They were farmers in Ireland, and came the potato famine in 1846. They, along with hundreds of thousands of others, came out to Canada, and my great-grandfather took up a farm. He was given land or bought land, and my great-grandfather was born on that farm, and he lived on the farm until he went to work on the railroad. He started off in a very low position, and eventually he became a conductor on the passenger trains, and he was the conductor on the first train that ever went west of Winnipeg. And then he became a superintendent, first in the section between Lake Superior and Winnipeg, just at the time of the Riel Rebellion in 1885, and a regiment of soldiers was sent out from Toronto under a general called General Middleton, and even at that time there were certain sections of the railroad that was not finished, and the soldiers would have to tramp through the bush in northern Ontario to get to the next branch of line. And when they came to Lake Superior, they had to walk across the ice. And we have a telegram sent from General Middleton to my great-grandfather to arrange for sleeping accommodation on the railroad once they got to the shore on the west side of Lake Superior. And then they were so tired they probably slept all their way to Saskatchewan, and there they were reassembled and went out to quell the Riel Rebellion there. In due course, my great-grandfather became the superintendent in the mountain region, as I said, and it was there because of his work that they named the mountain in 1904 that bears his name. He was the superintendent from 1887 to 1910, and it was a delight to have climbed the mountain. I think I was the first of my family to have done so, and that was 1965, and since then another of one of my cousins has also climbed it, and two of my nephews have climbed it also. They did this in 2004, just 9 years ago. So that is a story about Mount Niblock, and my family during the First World War moved to Toronto, and so my father met my mother in Toronto. They were married in Toronto. I was born in Toronto. I went to school in Toronto, university there, and it was while I was hitchhiking to college. One day a station wagon came by bearing the name of Frontier College, and so I asked a few questions, and before I knew it I was being interviewed to become a laborer teacher, and it was that thumb stuck out on the highway was one of the turning points in my life that has been formative for my whole life ever since, and no doubt it accounts for my having become an Anglican priest, having been a mathematics teacher for a few years before that. And in 1973 I was called to a parish out in Vancouver from my teaching at the boys' school in Alberta, and we have been out here. I have been retired for 20 years now, but I've been a priest of this diocese in the Vancouver area for 40 years. When I came out here in '73 and became part of the clergy team, to discover that this was called a destination diocese. In other words, you came here from other places and you never left. But in actual fact, we have had quite a few clergy who have gone on to other parishes in eastern Canada or in Alberta and Saskatchewan from here. So it's not altogether true, but it was true for me. It just happened that I married a girl who was born in BC and grew up in Vancouver, so when we came out here in '73, it was like coming home for her. She went to high school in South Burnaby High School, and lived in various places in Vancouver while she was in grade school. So it's been a delight also for our children to have been schooled in BC and to go to UBC and to find their way in life as well. BC is a very big province. I have never yet been north of Prince George, but we have traveled in the south a great deal. Very seldom do we go much beyond Salmon Arm. We sometimes go to our church conference center up at Sorrento Center, and but most of the time, if we travel at all, it's either up to Whistler or out to Chilliwack, up the valley, and to enjoy the scenery that is all around us here. I have climbed mountains on the coast. I have climbed the Stiwamus Chief about 5 years ago when I was in my mid-70s. And I have also climbed Hollyburn and Mount Strawn on the in North Vancouver, West Vancouver. But it is such a delightful, beautiful place that we never weary of the beautiful weather that we have. We are quite adept at the rainfall that falls in the wintertime, but we have known what it was to go through prairie winters when it goes down to 30, 40 below zero. In fact, there was one day when we were at the school west of Edmonton when it went down to minus 55 degrees. We called it square tire days because the air in the tires of our vehicles, because of the temperature, they shrink, and so therefore the tires tend to become softer, and so they freeze, and so you have a flat tire when you start the car up. Then the tires are still frozen, and until they get sort of bounce back into shape again, you get the square tire effect with the fat section of the tire coming round and around. But that's the way it is to grow up in the cold parts of our country. Okay, this is the family tree. There's our son, and this is me. So I can do this. There, this is my family tree.
Oh,
You see?
yeah.
And my parents, my grandparents, there's Darcy Bolton. There's the railroad man here, my great-grandparents. These are my great-great-grandparents. And I can go back. These are my triple great-grandparents. And back again. And back again. And notice, see? Married in 1707. Pam goes right back to 1484. See, there's Pam. Here's her parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. So there's Guillaume, you see. Oh no, this is his father, James. See, 1800?
Oh.
And he died in 1870. He was 69. And here's Guillaume. We're back to 1723, then back to 1696, back to 1660, back to 1626, back to 1595, back to 1557,
Wow.
back to 1521,
Wow.
back to 1488. There's about 14 generations there, you see? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now just count. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 15. And then to Doug, 16 generations. That's quite something.
Originally from England?
Yeah. Yeah, the Kellogg's that we saw originated in England, but the Demarest, they came from France to Holland, to the States. The Eckharts came from Germany, England. Armours came from Scotland, England, Ireland. Now these people came from England, but by way of Australia, and so it goes. Anyway, I thought you'd be interested in. This is the picture of the Niblocks here. This is my great-great-grandfather, James. He is the one who came out to Canada with 4 of his brothers. And this is his son, John Niblock, who was the railroad man, the general superintendent of the mountain region. And he is buried in Calgary. He retired out to BC at Naramata, and then ill health took him to Victoria, and he died in Victoria in 1914. And he was taken back to Calgary for burial, and his funeral took place the day that the First World War began, August the 4th, 1914. And this is my grandfather, a very handsome young man, and this is my father. My grandfather, whose name was Darcy Bolton Niblock, and he was known as Bolton to his friends, and we called him Grandpa. I only met him twice in my life, and of course these gentlemen had died long before I was born, and my father was named after his great-grandfather John, and there he is as a 3-year-old. He was born in Brandon, actually, when my grandfather was working with the CPR there, and then he came to Calgary. No, after him. This is the man that Mount Niblock is named after, right here. 63 when he died. He was 97 when he died. He was 72, and my father was 81.
Wow.
Nor is the idea of labor, because we were called laborer teachers. And so because there are no labor camps as such, because machines do the work now, the work of Frontier College is now focused upon children in the inner cities, and in the major cities in Canada we have teachers in the name of Frontier College who are helping children with their literacy as an adjunct to what they learn in school. But this goes back to a part of Canadian history, the development of the country with labor camps and mines, and but in my case it was the railroads. And I'll just show you some of these pictures now. This is taken in 1949 and 1950 and 1951. I've only shown 3 pictures from 1950, principally because it was a down summer. The foreman thought I was a spy on the gang and forbade me to take photographs, and although I did take some, but in the first year and the third year, These men, the first year, they were DPs who would come out from Germany. They had lost everything in the war. They were living in containment camps in Germany, having come from Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Czechoslovakia, Ukraine, Poland. And I lived and worked with them, and I took pictures and made copies of them, and they have these pictures circulating through their families through Europe. And the same thing happened in 1951 when I worked with Italians fresh out from their homeland, and they too sent pictures back to their families. And so I'm pleased that my photographs had traveled about and brought a lot of happiness to a lot of people far away. So here are the pictures then. I took this picture and then I put a circle around it because in my photograph album I had an indentation with this. I had a picture up to the left and to the right, right and left, and down here too. There were 4 pictures, and this was the first one. The first pictures were taken in Ontario, but they could well have been taken in BC as well. So I will show you a few of these. I put captions on them. I'm said here, I'm almost there en route to my gang. And this is way up in northern Ontario. And I'll show it to you. This one was taken from the fire tower in Ontario. And let me just click on this again. Oh, that's what it is. I have to double click. There we are. There. It's still a small picture, but there it is. And then this shows you a little bit about where we lived. We lived 10 men to a bunk car, 5 bunks, and I think I always slept in the upper bunk, if I'm not mistaken. This was back in 1949, so I was only about 21 years old at the time. And so I can go down and we'll take a few more pictures here. And this shows me a picture of me with teaching my evening class. This is just a part of the group, and they didn't always come out. Some of them were more tired than others, and this was me teaching them English because that was the language that they needed to know in Canada. This is a picture of me with all my gang, all my classmates. They didn't all come out, and I don't know what we would do if they all came out at one time, but they were not laborers in the usual sense, because they came from, you know, they had jobs and they had professions. This man here was an engineer, and this man here, I could tell by the way he spoke that he was very cultured man, but it was a light. This is a picture of me, and I've got this little wand here that I use to point to things on the blackboard. This man here was the only man in the gang from Estonia, and here's the Frontier College door that came up in the first picture. And so we head out to work, and there were 150 of us, of which 90 were DPs, and you can see that some of them were older men. This man has white hair here, you see, and I'll show you a picture of another one that I loved that man. He was an old man, and the gang was his home. And so at the end of the day, it's a different kind of picture, but there it is. The day's work done, and you can see they're dirty, and you can tell that they're not heading out. We're going home for dinner, and so I took this picture just to sort of fill out that part of the day. And this picture here is this is me there with a hammer in my hand, and we were unbolting the joins between the 2 rails, because we were putting in new rails on the railroad, and we led the gang, and so we would have to close the track, as I will mention later, for the trains to come through. So from time to time we would go back and help out further down the line until we got the train, the rail ready for the train to come through on. And this is exactly what happens with the trains coming through, so we have to take our machine off the track. And so it took 4 of us to lift it, and that's me there with my hat, and so we're clearing our part of the machines off the track, ready for a train to come through. And then this is a few other pictures. I love this picture here. They decided to stop work for the moment, and you can see here the spikers, and they're just taking time out for the spikers. These people they're putting, what are they doing? They're putting, that's right, they are fastening back the rails. They are doing the opposite of what I was doing. They're putting in the bolts, and the machine is tying them, because they would do them much more tightly than we could with our wrenches. And now we come to, this is another picture of, it shows you, they're taking a little bit of time out, but you can see how many men there were helping to replace the tracks. The one, because they simply wear out. And this is a picture I forgot to show you before, but it just shows you how spread out our gang was. This was the next machine behind us, and you can see that way back here they are still working, and we have all this section here has been removed of their old tracks, and they are putting the new tracks. You see, these are the new tracks that are going to be put in. These are the old ones that are going to be removed, and that's the way it was. Okay, so now we go on. And then there's the other part of it, once the tracks are laid, that we then had to put in new gravel to raise the tracks. And so this is called a lifting gang, and it was very slow, very boring work. And we were all together, clumped together like this, and it shows you the front gang here. We shovel in with our shovels the gravel that's been dumped on the side of the tracks as the cars go by, and we have to put it all in the middle. And then way back here you have the people, 8 men to a tie, tapping this gravel with their shovels tightly under every one of these ties. It was very slow work. We worked 60 hours a week. And we got 65 cents an hour. And we didn't mind that at all, because back in those days, 65 cents was not a bad earning. Okay. Let me just show you a couple more here. This is a picture of me. I've come back from my regular job, and I'm helping them tamping, and this is me here. We are tamping. Now, I'm going to show you this. This is really something. It's called hefting a rail to break a rail. And you can see how many men it took to, there were about 8 men that would have to lift a rail, and we put this this plank across here and I'll show you now why, because it was a very intricate position. The track is we were replacing 36-foot rails with 39-foot rails, so that when a train had to come through, we had to put the fraction of a track in place that would allow the train to do that, and this is how we did it. Here the sub-foreman, he had a chisel. Here is a fellow with a mallet, and here is the rail, and they press it down with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 men with their crowbars, and keeping their heads down so that the steel that flies off won't blind them. And this man here is wearing his goggles, and that's how we broke it. About 2 or 3 of these strokes, and the rail would break right in two. And the longer piece would be the one that we would always use for the to join up the tracks. Now, from time to time, we would simply move our camp one siding down and down, but there came a time when we would have to move several hundred miles to a whole new project, and we would therefore have to do this. We would have to put all of our machine on wheels into box cars, and here you can see some of these are the old men, and you can always tell the younger men, but you see they're old man, old man, old man, old man, and there they are. We're trying to get the machines into ready to go. This is a lovely picture too. Here we are waiting for a train to come by, and these are the DPs. I don't know whether there were all 90 of them or not, but they love to get their picture taken, and I'm sure this is one of the pictures that got sent back to Europe. Now, this is what happens. We got mail, and they always look for their mail, and that's what's happening here. That happened in every gang I was at, of course. And then we had, that was mail time. This is meal time, and here's the cook, and he's hitting a bar here with a hammer, and that's the signal. You can hear it like a gong that they're climbing in to go into the dining halls. And that was, we ate well and we were fed well. And we also had, on our own, we always had somebody in the gang who could cut hair, and this is what they're doing here. Actually, this group of people were taken 2 years later in '51, Italians in BC, but I put them together because of the subject matter. And this is what happened on Sundays, the only day we had free. And we would do our laundry, and very primitive methods we used, but we got the job done. And here I am in 1950 mending my boots on a Sunday, and they had a last that I could use, and it worked out very well. And this is something that I did in 1949 and 1951. I would send my films back to my father in Toronto. He would have them developed. He would send them out to me. I would put them up and put numbers on them and an order sheet beside them, and they would take orders, and I would send the orders back to my father, and he would have the copies done to the number of orders needed, and then I would think for 5 cents I would sell them to the group just to cover the cost. And that's something extra that I did. And here was a delightful English old-timer, one of the fellows whose home was on the gang 12 months a year. And you can tell how English he was because here he had his pocket watch and a gold chain, even with his broom that he's sweeping things up with. We called him Shorty, and he was a delight. Now, this is an rather interesting picture. It only happened once in 3 years, but there came a time when we had a chance to actually go for a swim. We were going past a lake, and some of the guys decided, well, let's go and swim. And so there they are. And so I thought I'd take a picture just to remind me of that wonderful day. Now, there came a time in 1949 when we worked the whole morning and no trains came through, and we were really tired, and we just didn't understand until lunchtime when we went back to the cook car and discovered there'd been a train wreck up ahead. So I was and a few others were sent out to help to restore the track to running order again, to help other people remove the wreck. And it was a long time. We were all afternoon, all night, and we didn't finish until the next morning. Here's the picture of it was a grain car, and the collision itself caused the grains to combust, and the fire was on. And it looks like that during the day, but at night time all these these cars were all bright red. They were so hot, almost ready to melt. It was incredibly hot, and it was pouring rain. So thankfully, we were not cold, but we could have been also very hot because of the heat of the fire. And this is what we did. One of the first things we did. This was the engine that was knocked over, a steam engine, and this was the coal where they got their fuel from, that they fed the furnaces in the steam engine, and we were getting rid of the coal so that it too would not burn and make the work even more difficult. A beautiful classroom that we had an entire boxcar, and at one end I taught, and at the other end I had maps and magazines, and I actually had a collection of rocks that they could find else in various parts of Canada, and some of them were very interested in the mineral makeup of our country. And I had spent the 1950 on the CNR up in BC between McBride and Prince George. One of the things that happened that summer that is worth noting is that it was the year of the great floods in Winnipeg, and the Fraser River was in flood also, and the mosquitoes in August were absolutely unbearable. And we had to wear masks for 3 weeks, and I could, with my hand, I could kill 50 mosquitoes on another man's back without any trouble at all. This is near Fernie, about 10 miles southwest of Fernie, which was about 50 miles west of the BC-Alberta border, down in the southeast corner of the province. And this is a day that the men arrived. I had been there for a month working with Doukhobors, old Russian-born. How bright it was! It's even brighter than the 1949 classroom. But this time, my bunk car and classroom are all one. This was my bunk up here, and here was my blackboard. And so we just had a small group of students this summer, but nonetheless, that's the way it worked out. We had a much smaller gang as well. Put this in here. It shows us working, but we were working right past our camp, and I put this in because this sign said Frontier College. 2 years before, I had written it right across the door, but this time it was right across here, and it said Frontier College. These are jacks, and we were lifting the track up and tamping in not the gravel, but now crushed stone. And this stone came from, no doubt, the mines in Kimberley, not far away, and it was excellent ballast for the tracks, and it was easier to tamp this than the gravel itself. Again, we are going past our camp, although most of the time we were some miles away from camp, but we had to go past. And this thing here is, we're going around a curve here, and this is how they were able to gauge how to jack up the track, because when you go around a curve, you have to have one rail a little bit higher than the other. The outside rail has to be a little bit higher because there has to be a curve. Otherwise, a train going fast might just simply fall over. So that's how it was. Some days we had to work in the rain, and this is what we're doing now with our crowbars. We are lining the track. We're getting the curve just right by moving the whole thing through the gravel, and that was nice work too. And then I put this in simply because we were unloading rails, but simply because we had a steam engine. And today, you know, the last steam engine I saw was way back in 1953, which is 60 years ago. And so therefore, people born since then have never actually seen one, but that's what they looked like. In flood conditions, that the pressure of the water flowing around the curve could undermine the track itself. So these boulders were being come from the mine, and they were being unloaded to prevent the erosion of the ground around the track. Here is the Elk River, and this is where we were side by side, and I wanted to include it just so you could see the river and the track. And this river flows into the Kootenay River. The Kootenay River winds down into the States, comes back to Kootenay Lake, and flows into the Columbia River, and the Columbia River flows all the way through the States and comes out to the Pacific Ocean way down in Portland. And in the mountains, we were never very far from water, and it came right off the mountains, and we could drink it right like that out of a spout, or if we weren't near a spout, then this is what we did. Lunches on the track. Normally we went back and sat down at tables and had a proper lunch just like we did dinner in the evening. But that's a typical picture of a small gang having lunch, and always glad to have food in our tums. And every 2 weeks or so we got a check, and here's the paymaster, the roadmaster, signing us our checks for the work, 65 cents a day, 10 hours a day, 60 hours a week. And last, a picture of me teaching. Small group, and there's my interpreter. I also put here Frontier College Latin motto above the blackboard, and it says in Latin, Vita sine literaris mors est. That means life without literature is death. And it's a way of saying to be literate enlarges life no end. And the last picture shows me with my accordion, and I'm leading them in some Italian tunes that they love to sing. Italians really love to sing them. But I took my accordion every summer, and they were men I worked with were very happy to have me play for them whenever there was an occasion to do so. So that's it. 3 summers spent on the railroad, working as a laborer on a railroad gang, and teaching the men I worked with at night. My father despaired of me ever being a reader like he was, but I have certainly come a long way since his day. He would be quite impressed with my library, were he still alive. But I had at one time 5,000 books when we lived in a house, but I think 1,500 now, if I'm not mistaken. Anytime I buy a book, I have to get rid of a book. And so I can show you these books here, and I can show you the books in our bedroom too. I took this picture on the west coast at Long Beach, south of Tofino. It shows you the water lapping up from the waves that have come up, and it shows the sun reflecting. And I am just delighted with the color, the texture of the picture, and the memories that I have, because my wife and I have been out to the Long Beach not many times, but a good number of times, and have enjoyed even camping on the beach. And it's a delight to be part of that as well. My great-grandfather John was a very avid Methodist Christian, and when he was the superintendent in Alberta, he always insisted that in the last car of a freight train, which was called a caboose, where the workmen on the train lived when they weren't operating the train, there was always a bookshelf, and on the bookshelf he placed a Bible. And he would have inspections of the caboose to always make sure that the Bible was there. And he was also responsible for drumming up sufficient interest to build the first hospital that was west of Winnipeg, in Medicine Hat, when he was serving there before Calgary. And one of the things that he did was to have he would bring VIPs, as we call them, very important people, through on the railroad, and when they got to Medicine Hat, he would always sort of plead with them to leave a significant contribution for the building of the hospital. And so that's the way he was. Well, Vancouver, has, and BC, It's by the standards of Europe, it is a very, very new. It only came into existence yesterday, but it has developed its own history, and Vancouver itself. In fact, I have a grandson who had a part in this best-selling book that came out from Chuck Davis on the history of Vancouver. That was published last year, and it was his job to provide the index at the back of it. So our family is sort of connected with BC, and in that small but significant way as well. One of the things that people need to know is that before the railroad was built, that there was I think a kind of a fear that the country to the south of us would have envious eyes for what we had up here and might want to take us over. And in 1812, just 101 years ago, there was an invasion of American soldiers into Ontario, in Toronto, in Windsor, and further east along the St. Lawrence River. But this kind of threat was sort of set aside when we said, if we can build a railroad, then that will make our country strong. But when they built the CPR, they could have come through the south, a more southerly route than they did, because the West Kootenay Pass down almost at the border is much easier to go through than the Kicking Horse Pass. But they felt that having a railroad too close to the border might also have been a liability in the event of some kind of American invasion. I think it is probably right that the surveyors that came ahead of the building of the railroad did choose the Kicking Horse Pass, even though it was a monstrously difficult engineering feat to have done it, so much so that they had to have a double loop in the track where the railroad itself was tunneled under the mountains, 2 mountains in fact, in a kind of a figure of 8, in order to decrease the steepness of the descent. More than a few engines ran out of control before the tunnels were put in, and my great-grandfather would have been part of the decision-making, no doubt, in making this come to pass. The Howes Pass probably would have been the better route to go, except that it really was not connected with a river system comparable to the Bow River that flows into Calgary from Lake Louise and Banff. And so the route of the railroad, in fact, did become the route that became part of the tourist attraction of people from around the world to some of the most beautiful parts of Canada at the border between Alberta and BC. When you rise up through the ranks in a railroad, you start at the menial jobs, and you then become more proficient in more, I guess you call, high-class positions. Instead of maintaining the railroad, you then maintain the trains that run on the railroad, and then you would then maintain the people who run the railroad, and then eventually you become a superintendent. This is a story about water, and I've tried to link water to God's provision of it for us. I've tried to recognize that within the life of the church, that water is often only thought of in terms of baptism. See it in the sense of John in chapter 4, where Jesus speaks to the woman at the well, that he can give her water such that she will never thirst again. And so I have, in the first one here, talk about the water that comes down from the mountain. And I've talked now about the waters that flow through the lakes and rivers. But then I talk about the water for the thirsting soul that comes from the Garden of Eden. Then I talk about the John chapter 4, where you have reference to shepherds coming to halt to drink and to find their rest and to feed their sheep. And then to recognize that Jesus coming and sharing of his wealth, spiritual wealth, so that his living water floods into the deserts of our need. And then I go back to the Bible, and in Ezekiel there's a marvelous picture of the temple in Jerusalem having water flowing out of all the doors, east, north, south, and west. And I then say that Jesus lives to be that story, not just in Jerusalem, but on every shore. And so we praise God for the water that comes from him as living water to our thirsty souls. So that's I have loved to take photographs of beautiful things, and these two are from the Minter Gardens up on the way to Chilliwack, and just south of Agassiz. This picture here better because of the way the water falls. I have always been in love with water. It's though it has a downside in floods and that sort of thing and cyclones, but I just love the whole idea of water, especially as it comes off mountains. And now we have just come through the beautiful season of the blossoms, and outside our home here is this lovely, lovely blooming cherry tree. I have taken pictures of it in different times and places, but there's two that are especially beautiful to me. One when there was a huge, huge dark cloud came up, even while the sun was shining in the west, and I went out and got my camera and I took this picture of the same tree. Here they are on a bright day and a dark day, and I was a little bit disturbed that the new owners of this house have this van and it's always parked there, and I just had to take the picture with it there. But lo and behold, another white car came by, and so I have a vehicle at both sides, and it somehow has balanced out. But that's just this week. So it's, but this is a lovely favorite because I've never seen a darker cloud than that. In fact, the photograph the actual was darker still than what you see here. It's just that the developers of the film, they couldn't believe it, and so they never made it as dark as it should be. Up at Whistler, we have a place where we sometimes go. A friend of ours has a chalet at Nita Lake, and this, I think, is one of the most beautiful pictures I've taken. And this is Nita Lake here, and over here is where the new hotel and at the railway station has been built. And over here there was just bush and forest until just recently, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and now very elegant mansions have been built in this area. The railroad track goes right along here. And many years ago, in fact, it would be 30 years ago, the one dog that we had in our family, a beautiful husky dog, he died while we were up at Whistler, and we buried him just beside the railroad tracks over here. And now He has the lake on one side and these beautiful mansions on the other as part of his grave. I have a picture here that I didn't take, but it's one that I could have taken because I have been here. This is on the Banff-Jasper Highway. We're actually in Alberta here, but this mountain over here is in BC, and this mountain here is the one, Mount Niblock, named after my great-grandfather. And the main line of the CPR comes through here, and right through here is what is called the Crow's Nest Pass that leads us into BC and down into the valley where the Columbia River flows, and I just love that picture. This lovely Bernard Lake is right on the, and it is a beautiful place to take a picture with the lake in the front and this beautiful view of the Rocky Mountains. So you have BC over here and you have Alberta over here. It's a beautiful arrangement. And while we are on the subject, this is taken at Lake Louise. Again, water in the front. There's the Victoria Glacier, and this ridge here is the boundary between Alberta and BC, and everything water flowing from down here ends up in Hudson Bay, and the water flowing the other side ends up in the Pacific Ocean. And over here is Mount Niblock, the same one where named after my great-grandfather, who was the superintendent of the CPR back at the turn of the century, for the mountain region, all the way from Swift Current in Saskatchewan to Field in BC, and I climbed it when I was about 45, maybe 40 years old, way back in 1965, and it's just short of 10,000 feet. But it was named after him because of the respect that they had for him and his work with the CPR back in the days shortly after the railroad was built. Yes, I took this picture, but I don't know where it is, but I just love it. And this picture was taken when I was just 17 years old, and I just finished winning the high school cross-country race, and I feel quite happy about what happened that day. And you can still see the sweat under my arms. And when I was 50 years old, I ran my first marathon here in Vancouver. And my wife took this picture of me, and it looks like I'm leading the pack, but there's lots of other people running ahead of me. But I also have the picture of the finish line, and you can see the finish, Vancouver International Marathon, and I've just finished, and I ran it 3 times in 80, 81, and 84, and this was in 1980, and it was the best time of 3 hours and 35 minutes. And I learned just a few years ago that my time was good enough for me to have qualified to run in the Boston Marathon. Something I never did, but it was good to know that I had run so well. I also wanted to show you a picture of me, a younger man. I had just come out to Vancouver to serve in St. Mary's Anglican Church in Carrisdale, and here I am baptizing a young fellow. And years later I was to serve in a church where his wife assisted the organist with the hymns by playing her flute. And we have been good friends all these years. Here is a picture of my wife and I that tells you a little bit about one of the most ancient lakes in the whole world. This is Kootenay Lake, and in the eastern BC, and my mother-in-law used to have her home here in retirement, and we would visit her for 2 weeks every summer. And I always built a raft for the children so that they could have a place where they could dive off the raft into the water. And this picture actually was the first picture that my eldest son ever took. And it's just one of those lovely pictures that we have been so happy to look at from time to time. This is a picture also of Kootenay Lake with the Idaho range looking south, and it was a beautiful part of the world, and we just wish that we could get back there more often. Now, I want to show you some pictures taken while we were living in Alberta, and I took time out as a parish priest to be a teacher priest at a boys' school west of Edmonton, 50 miles, that was built in the bush, and they had a winter program that involved snowshoeing in the winter time, and also dog runs. And here's a picture of one of our senior boys heading out with the dogs and the sleigh loaded up with their camping gear for the weekend. And here is a picture I took of some of the boys, and I was assigned to them for the Saturday run of 20 miles. And this is the picture of them coming up a hill, and it's a picture that I'm very proud of. A number of the boys came from BC, but most of them came from Alberta, and we had some from other places, even from China. And I had one boy all the way from Florida. And this is him. He was now in the dog program, and this was his dog. It was his job to feed him and care for him throughout the whole academic year, and came the weekends in the wintertime, then he would be with his dog, and 4 other boys with their dogs, and a team of 5 boys and 5 dogs would head out. And I just love this picture of this beautiful dog and this young man who must be in his 50s, if not early 60s now. I think that's, I mentioned my dog, and I thought that I should have my dog in the picture. This is a picture of my daughter, Ruth, when she was, I think, in college. It's taken at Lighthouse Park in West Vancouver. And this dog here was his mother was one of our huskies in this dog program, and we were so pleased to have him as our own member of the family. We were at the school for 2 years, and he lived to be 11 and a half, and from the time that he was born till the time we buried him, he was much beloved, and even now we have great affection for him, all those many years ago. We called him Rascal, and he used to run with me on my runs back in the days when you didn't have to put dogs on leashes, and he would usually run twice as far as I did because he had his little side trips, and he would always catch up with me, and we would do our 5 or 6 or 7 miles together.